Excellent. Yeah. So I say should be a we've got defense anyway, so it's going to be a risk.
Good afternoon, all. Welcome to the Resources Governance Scrutiny Committee on the 24th of March 2022. Can I remind everybody this meeting will be webcast for live or subsequent broadcast via the Council's meeting YouTube site, and that members of the press and public may record and take photographs except where confidential or exempt items. I have one apology. Councillor Barry, is there any more? No? Declaration of interest. Members are reminded that they must declare all relevant pecuniary and non-pecuniary interest arising from any business to be discussed at this meeting. If a disposable pecuniary interest is declared, a member must not speak or take part in that agenda item. Any declarations will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. Before I carry on, quick introductions, because we've got people online as well. So we'll start in here. Councillor Mahmood, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Councillor Mahmood, I represent the Confidential Ward.
It's Councillor Marion Jenkins, Mere Green Ward in Sutton Coldfield.
Councillor Sophia Hartman Ward.
Christian Skade, Interim Head of Scrutiny Committee Services.
Mohammed Clark, Chair, and also representing Ward and Ward.
Councillor Tristan Chatfield, Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources.
Sarah Pitt, Director of Finance, Section 151.
Mohammed Sajid, Interim Head of Financial Strategy.
Right, for people who are online, we'll start with, is it Amanda? Introductions from people who are online?
Apologies, Chair. My name's Amanda Simcox. I'm the Scrutiny Officer.
Thank you. Kathy? Thank you. Jim?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jim Parkinson, Acting Head of Policy and Governance within the CPS.
Okay, Steve?
Good afternoon, everybody. Steve Sandercock, Assistant Director of Procurement.
Lisa?
Good afternoon, Lisa Taylor, Interim Head of Financial Planning.
Richard?
Richard Pearce, Finance Manager on Financial Strategy team.
Okay, thank you very much. Is that everyone? Yeah, okay, thanks everyone. Action notes, to confirm action notes of the meeting held on 10th of February 2022. Just before I go on to financial monitoring, month 10, Councillor Tilsley has just shown up. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Paul Tilsley.
Okay.
I was when I woke up this morning.
Good. Down to Cabinet Member.
Thank you very much, Chair. Sorry.
Financial monitoring.
I was engrossed in reading my own report. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I think bring good news. I think we are, as I said at the last meeting, we're confident that our financial position will improve, and it has. So at the end of month 10, we are now forecasting a underspend on the general fund of some £600,000, which represents a grand total of 0.1% of the overall budget, but a £4.8 million improvement since month 9. And this is made up of 37.1 revenue budget non-COVID underspend, balanced with a 36.4 overspend related to direct COVID expenditure and reduction in income. And I think we've been through repeatedly in the past what underpins those reductions in income. I'd also point out that this report, in terms of savings, we have now hit a figure of some 91% of our savings target. So that's 33.4 million out of a total of 36.7 originally projected. This represents an increase of 1.9 million since month 9. But perhaps significantly, we've also got to 20.1 million on establishment savings. And that I think is significant because it's one of the first times, certainly in my memory, where we have successfully landed a large-scale corporate savings target in year. And not only done so, but we've actually exceeded it as well, which I think is a credit to the officers sat in this room, but also to the service areas themselves engaged so helpfully in that. And I think actually do represent quite a sea change in terms of maturity of the organisation, and hopefully will set us in good stead for some of the really substantial savings targets we still have to achieve next year as well. I think that's probably all I'll pick out. Maybe just worth pointing out that we have, since I think the last meeting, the national pay agreement for what is now almost the last financial year, so the one we're just about to exit, 1.75% was agreed by 2 or 3 trade unions, but it went through. And obviously there will now be negotiation over the next years. But that 1.75 has now been obviously factored into the figures and will be paid out to staff in due course. But as I say, that pay negotiation this next coming financial year creates a degree of uncertainty, and as obviously due to the inflationary pressures we're aware of, is likely to be quite choppy, let's just say. So one to keep an eye on for next year, if I may say. Thank you, Chair. Is that back to, I don't know if Sarah, do you want to add anything?
Yeah.
Members? Chairman, if I may, can I thank Tristan for his report? They've always been specific and to the point, and more than happy to receive them. The only question that I would have is, he says that 91% of the savings have been delivered, which is 9%. Have those 9% savings been identified and nailed down? And the other thing is, Chairman, I did go to the BMI as per the instructions.
I think, Councillor Gilsey, because Jane's off sick, she's not well, and that was the reason rather than saying. I wasn't aware of the. No, it's all right. It's all right. And I did as well. Yeah. I took the risk up. Yeah. Can you just answer?
All right, sorry, yeah.
First.
Well, those yes, Councillor, those savings are identified as part of the budget into this financial year, about to now exit, to tune to 1%. What is left, which is 2.855 million, it's on table 3.47, is a mix of called high risk and undeliverable. But I think obviously at this stage of the year, whilst every effort will be made to continue to drive them out, I think there has to be a recognition that some of those undeliverable ones will remain undeliverable now until the end of the year. But as I said, 91% is a significant improvement on where we've been previously. Obviously, we all like to be 100%, but actually, given the overperformance of the establishment savings, I think it does indicate that there is reason for some degree of positivity in terms of closing that gap off. But I think near enough 91%, unless Sarah correct me, is probably near enough where we're going to land on the outside.
That was the reason for my question, because it's all very well having say 50 million savings at the beginning of the year. If you don't deliver a proportion of those in months 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way through, you're then left with a mountain decline in the last month, and we are in the last month now. Hence the more than in the last month. Hence my question. But I accept that to a certain extent there are compensations from staff savings, but there is going to be a carry forward. Councillor Jenkins?
Yes, thank you. I did, by the way, I did see a note about the room change. So I think we were told, and I do think this is a much more suitable room with daylight, furniture and everything. It's much better. Can you just reassure us that the reason you haven't got the underspend is that you haven't allocated all the overspend to indirect COVID costs?
So, can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, just reassure us that you said you've achieved a 600k underspend on the general fund. Just reassure us that isn't because you've pushed all the overspend into the indirect COVID costs category. In other words, you've used COVID as an excuse to get an underspend on the general fund.
I'll bring Sarah in a second if I can, but I think obviously we've tried to be as accurate as we possibly can in terms of reporting where there's been COVID and non-COVID impacts. And I think all the way through, over the last couple of years, members will have seen all the way through this reporting, we've been quite careful to try and make sure everything is allocated correctly. I think that's been recognised nationally, the work that's been done around that. Obviously, it's never going to be a perfect science. If car park is down 20%, let's say, on income, you can't 100% guarantee that 20% decrease is a result of COVID, but it's a reasonable assumption, I think it's safe to make. So there'll be a number of reasonable assumptions contained within that. But yes, I'm pretty confident that it's pretty robust. As I said, this isn't for this report, these have been tracked and monitored all the way through. But I'll bring Sarah in.
Thank you. So 36 million of COVID spend. So we have been tracking that. We had money from government, but only for the first quarter. So we have had to make compensatory savings for quite a bit of that spend. So we've had spend controls in place, running from probably at least the halfway point of the year to mitigate some of that. So yeah, that's in the position. So we've done extraordinarily well actually, because we've made large compensatory underspends elsewhere in the general fund.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Any more questions? Yeah, Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tristan, for reporting. In fact, thank you for all the reports that you've presented during this municipal year. It's been very well presented, and you've always been quite detailed in the approach that you've adopted, which is most welcome. Just a couple of points I wanted to highlight. In 1.11, I'm pleased to see that we're still receiving good, steady stream of income for both green waste and bulky collection. This is despite the fact that we've got 1 million mobile household recycling centres that have now been adopted across the city and working extremely well with residents using them. So at one point I remember a few meetings back, I was just asking the question whether we're going to see a drop in green waste collections and bulk collection. That hasn't happened. In fact, we've had an increase, which is most welcome, which shows that there is a service for the city in different ways in terms of disposal of their waste. There's still an underspend of 1.1 million on environmental improvements and street cleansing. I'm just a bit kind of surprised that there is an underspend, because we have got we've put in 7.2 million for street cleansing, so I'm not sure where that underspend is coming from. And 1.12 around human resources. There was an article that I read in Birmingham Live about an interim contractor being brought in for £30,000 because the human resources director is on annual leave. Is that still the case? And are we still paying for an interim director? I've got a few more questions, but we'll go on catches this week.
So we take those two in reverse. Well, actually, I'll do it in order. We've had the discussion about the environmental improvements claim this budget before, as I recall. I'm trying to find the answer to the previous note, but I can't. But I'm fairly sure we've had the question before. I'll have to pick it up with the service areas. I think it was there was an answer provided as a recall last meeting. And yes, we have employed services of an interim director of HR. I won't say any more than that.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just that we put in more money for street cleansing and environmental improvements, but we've got none of this plan. We're just trying to marry up the two figures, 7.2, 1.1. Just on 2.14 around capital receipts, there's still some that's outstanding. That's not worrying for us as a council, is it? Because I think the projection was 100 million this financial year, but only 54.2 million has been achieved. And I just want to know, make sure that that's not delaying any projects that we had wanted to deliver with those receipts, and it's going to move on to the next financial year anyway. On 3.5, do we have, is this the most accurate figure we're going to get now for home to school transport, the overspend? And do we now have a defined cost for the termination of the contract with Birmingham North Birmingham Travel? Is that still ongoing? And the third question would be 3.16. Obviously, with the increased energy costs and lower pricing, do we anticipate an increase in putting more money into the housing general fund, because there may be more people that are seeking temporary accommodation or are homeless?
Yeah, sorry. Capital, yeah, it's mode. Pick up the capital question.
If we were just trying to find the figure that a few minutes ago from my piece that crashed.
Well, I'll pick up the home to school one. I think the cost of the North Birmingham travel are set out at 3.7, and I think the suggestion there is it's pretty much it's up to a worst case of 3.3 million. So I think we're pretty confident now that those figures are as presented.
Yeah, we've got £65 million already achieved in the bank so far. We've got a potential 18.5 to go through before the year end that we hope will go through. One or two projects have slipped into the new year, into April, because we're in negotiations, but obviously we don't want to set ourselves a deadline, which might mean weakening our negotiation position. But they should be achieved in the new year. And we have enough capital receipts built up that these wouldn't affect the capital programme or any projects that would split as a result. So there's no impact on the capital programme, and then we should achieve 18 million of the 100 million by 31st of March, and then the following 20 million are still negotiations should be achieved early in the new year.
Thank you. And Chair, just two final questions. One's just elaboration of increase in electricity costs. In 3.32, there's an overspend of 500,000 for street lights and traffic signals. That's obviously before the increase. We're going to see the huge increase that's going to have an impact on all households across the country in April. So are we forecasting, I'm assuming we budgeted for that increase that's going to happen in April and October of this year. And then the final one is just on 3.41, just get my head around the figures here. On the pressure on commercial rent, it says 2 million. And it says it's made up of 1.7 million in commercial rent, in addition to 1.1 million pressure due to COVID-19. So is that 2.8 million in rent pressure? And just on that, how are we going about in retrieving some of that lost income that we've experienced over the last 2 years? Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I'll pick those up. In terms of electricity costs, we should be protected to an extent because we have a contract that we recently entered into, which Cabinet was it January, February Cabinet? Paper went through our new electricity contract. And obviously, given the direction prices have gone in, I think we were quite prudent, and it was a good time to get that in because the direction has only been upwards since. So if we were doing it now, it would be costing us significantly more. There we go. Should bring Steve on procurement in energy.
Hi, Councillor. Yes, we do have a new arrangement in place, so we are protected for a period in time. I mean, clearly those costs are likely to catch up with us over the course of the when we enter into new arrangements beyond this one. But it has protected us for the foreseeable anyway.
How long is the limit on that? Yeah. How long for, Steve? Is it protected?
I believe it's for 12 months, but if I can just if I can find out the details, I'll then come back to you in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
If I remember, that contract was a mix of buying on the market and then buying in banks, and it was a sort of, we use a third party to make judgments about when the best time to manage that is in our best interest. In terms of property income, I think, in terms of rental income, I think that's one, beyond the detail that came over in the report, I'd have to get a further note from the service area. I'm sure, obviously, I think your reading of the figures is the same as mine, it's 2.8 overall down, some of which can be directly attributed to COVID, some of it can't. So, but yes, what mitigations are possible, I can pick up with the service area. So,
thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that. ERP update.
Hi, sorry, I was on mute.
Yes.
Hi there. So I think for us, we're getting very close now to our go live of April the 11th. The information that we've provided in the pack is now about 3 weeks old. So some of the RAG statuses that you see in this pack have now changed. So I'll just go through where we are specifically because we've had a steering committee meeting this week. We've now confirmed that both the Oracle solution in the majority of areas that we are delivering are now through their testing cycle that we've had. We've also now just completed our payroll comparison testing. So this is where we look at the number of people we're paying in SAP, and we review that with the number of people that we're paying in Oracle. And of the 11 payrolls that we have to do, 8 of them have passed their 98% accuracy rating, and 3 have not. Of the 3 that have not, 1 has failed by about 0.35%, and the other 2 have failed by 1.5%. So we are now discussing whether we need to put a mitigation in place with regard to the ongoing support for the payroll after April the 11th. We've identified as a programme in our functional areas, so the particular pieces of the software that enable the council to do particular processes and activities where we have particular issues. And we have a clear list of issues that we're working through in the last 2.5 weeks now before April the 11th to close out the majority of those issues that we have. And we've been keeping people on our steering committee abreast of what those particular issues are in terms of what we're doing. We have now gone through a process in terms of how we make decisions. So in terms of the pack, if you look at slide 8, this is the decision-making process that we have been currently going through. We have done the decision on the 10th, and we have started our what we call our cutover process, which is where we take the data from the existing systems and we move them into the new system. We've also gone through our decision point on the 17th of March, where we ask people within the council to stop processing certain activities in order for it to give us a chance to get the data to a point where we can then pick it up and take it. And today we have spoken to our steering committee for the 24th about where we stand with our payroll solution, and also confirming the number of defects that we will have as we go across the go live period as well. So for us as a programme, the final decision is going to be on the 1st of April, at which point we will be asking in effect to freeze the data in SAP and to stop using SAP and to load that data into our new system and to begin to create our new users. Then on the 7th of April, we will start to look at access for people who need to start processing the payroll. And then on the 10th, we have a final decision period to be able to allow access to all of our end users on the 11th of April. In terms of the particular items that we have considered, we want to look at whether or not we need to provide some additional resource to support any of the defect resolution that we will have within the payroll solution, and also to help us in that regard to correct any issues that we will take across as we go into Oracle. We've kind of also briefed CLT around some of the potential areas where we may need their support, because there will be issues and bumps along the way in terms of the things that we are going to implement. Particularly, I would suggest around some of the integrations with other applications, which can take a couple of goes initially to get those working and flowing correctly as they should, despite the fact that they have all been tested and passed their testing. I think finally, on our budget position, we remain within our budget that was set against the cabinet paper. We still carry a contingency of approximately 780,000 as we go into the last few weeks of the programme. And we're not expecting at the moment to have to draw down on that contingency to any great extent. In the appendices of the paper also, we provided just some information around how we assess where we are in terms of our go live readiness and some of the lessons that we've learned as we've gone along as well. So at the moment, we are currently predicting to be on track for the 11th, subject to the ratification of our governance process, which is through our steering committee, and also putting in an appropriate mitigation to make sure that for the 3 payrolls that have not met their 98%, and indeed for the payrolls that have, but still have corrections that need to be made, we have the appropriate resource and processes in place to ensure that we are not paying people incorrectly as much as we possibly can. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, James. Members? Yeah, Councillor Hinckley.
Yeah, I was going to ask, but I think you mentioned then that the integrations have been tested. and they work, because there's a lot of those, there's 150 of those, if I remember rightly. James, is that
Yeah.
100?
There are over 100 integrations, correct, here.
Right, okay. So that's a big risk area, but you know, from what you say, it doesn't sound that bad. So can I just check that, you know, the real test of the system is being able to do the bank reconciliation. We do a bank rec every day at Birmingham City Council, if I remember. So as of the 12th of April, we'll be doing our bank reconciliation off the Oracle system and not the SAP system.
Yeah, it's true.
Because when the bank balances, you know, you can't be too far wrong. It's then just a question of which buckets you put the numbers in. So that's reassuring. So I mean, I think based on what you said, it sounds like it will be able to go live.
Well, that's a decision for my steering committee, and that's the way we set up the governance of the programme. I think what we've tried to do as a programme is be as open and as frank as we can about the remaining issues that we will have, as any programme of this nature does carry across its go live period. But I think what we have achieved to date is significant from where we were potentially 12, 13, 14 months ago, in terms of now having a solution that is capable of supporting the processes of the council.
Then the SAP system will be shut off, obviously. So, well, I know you'll need it probably for legacy inquiries and things, but we won't be processing anything on SAP after, say, the 12th of April.
Well, it'll actually be before that. So there will be access available to SAP for the close down team. There is a clear process for how we will do that, and clear understanding of the users that will still be able to close out the accounts from 21-22, which will be done within SAP. But fundamentally, from the 1st of April, there will be no more operational transactions in SAP.
SAP will stay open to do the year-end transactions, accruals, moving things around on the accounts, but no, James says no new world or real world transactions should now come into this, and that will stay open until we complete the audit.
No, I understand. Yeah. Well, I mean, based on what you said, it sounds like it'll go live on time. So yeah, good.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Any more questions from members? Or we move on? Okay. Thanks, James.
Thank you.
Okay. Number 7, commercial governance task and finish group. First of all, before we go on this, there's a lot of hard work. Can I thank all the members, all the officers, for all the extra on top of the scrutiny committee, all the work and the commitment, and also officers Jane and Christian and Steve. Thanks for all your efforts and all your help. Would you like to take us through the recommendations, Steve?
Yes, Councillor, certainly happy to do that, and thank you also for the input from the members of the task and finish group. I know that you know, we've been meeting since November, and obviously have had to, if you like, cover a lot of ground in between that time. So I really do appreciate the activities and the work of members, you know, throughout that. So as part of that, the report, we've done quite a bit of background research by doing information gathering from other core cities with our partners in across the West Midlands, and also looking at how the impacts of the Green Paper would likely impact our ultimately recommendations that go forward into any new procurement governance arrangements as well. We've surveyed both officers across the council, and we've also surveyed suppliers. So all of those, if you like, have those activities have, if you like, steered us towards the recommendations that have been put forward. And the recommendations were discussed in quite a length with members, and the recommendations as set out are on pages, I think, from pages 56 of the actual appendix 1. So it's pages 56 through to scrolling down through 65 set out, and there are 22 recommendations in total, which the proposal would be that those recommendations form the basis of the updates to our procurement governance arrangements. Chair, did you want me to go through the recommendations individually, or how would you wish to do that?
Briefly, because some of the members actually aren't aware, so if you can just go through one by one.
One by one, by all means, I mean, recommendations. Number one is the introduction of a make or buy decision for pre-procurement stages. So that really would sort of set out with clarity when the council uses its in-house services and existing contracts, or whether it then moves forward with a public sector procurement process. So that's recommendation one. Recommendation two is the introduction of a new purchase threshold for under 5,000, spend under 5,000. That really then is a proceed to purchase arrangement. So at the current arrangements we have in place are under £10,000, then 3 quotes are sought. So it's to try and, if you like, streamline some of the bureaucracy around smaller value activity for the council. So that's recommendation two. Recommendation three is the introduction of a new threshold to replace that 10,000 threshold. So from the 5,000 level up to 25,000 level, we would then be introducing a minimum of 1 quote, local supplier or SME where possible, with a preference for 3 quotes. So that's the third recommendation. So it sort of again gives a little bit more sort of flexibility without above that 10,000 level, with the aim of trying to just remove some of the bureaucracy around a 10,000 level that we've currently got.
Yeah, on the 3 recommendations where possible from small medium, we did say it has to be 2 local.
Apologies, Chair, if that's come through. I'm just reading from the slide. So
I'm sure we just that's the task and finish. Yeah. 2 of the 3 quotes has got to be local businesses.
That's for 3 and 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So 2 from two local from 3. Yes. Minimum of 1 quote, but where preference 3 quotes, and 2 of those must, where possible, from local.
Yeah. Thanks.
Apologies for the clarity on that one. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Carry on, Steve.
Okay. Thank you. So recommendation 4 then is increasing the lower threshold to the 25,000. That again falls in line with the raising of that 10,000 level. And then this recommendation 5 is introduction of a new upper threshold for work. So that would then see a threshold for works activities, construction related, for example, of 25,000 to 250,000, or the relevant procurement contract regulation threshold for concessions or concessions arrangements. So that again, then, if you like, brings the recommendation, the thresholds in line with the current ceiling arrangement for works related contracts. Recommendation 6 for over 250,000 for works or concessions arrangements would be also apply there. So that's sort of up to the PCR recommendation. So that then, if you like, sets out when formal tendering arrangements are to be carried out and tendering procedures are to be carried out. So that would include things like advertising on Contracts Finder, advertising on Find It in Birmingham, etc., and also making sure that we'd be using the council's e-tendering system as well. So PCR recommendations, recommendation number 7 is for the PCR procurement contract regulations thresholds to be maintained at a level of 10 million. So that's maintaining that level. That then is Cabinet can delegate decisions to officers through the procurement planning activities report, the PPAR report, obtain approvals for delegation of procurement reports to award contract, and decisions where the estimated total contract value exceeds that stated figure by 20% or 5,000, then it would need to go to Cabinet in those situations. Over 10 million, we would be again looking to maintain the current requirements that are set out within their current procurement governance arrangements. Recommendation 9 is removal of the 2.3 clause in regards to exemptions within the Constitution. So an exemption for any standing order. So what we'd be looking to do then is then make clearer the arrangements that are in place, because the arrangement that's currently within the procurement governance arrangement is quite loose, and what we would want to do is then provide greater clarity around that. So recommendation, if you like, at 10 links into that, which is then the introduction of a clear list of out of scope scenarios. So that would, for example, include a contract for or on behalf of a school that has a delegated budget, and those sort of situations there. So we would be very clear to set that out and provide greater clarity from what currently exists. Recommendation 11 is then introducing a clear list of waivers. So this would then set out situations where the rules would be looked to be applied from being where exceptions are sort of taken forward outside what's currently set out in those procurement governance arrangements. So that would, for example, be a situation where somebody wanted to not apply social value in a certain contractual arrangement because, for example, it would add no value or something like that. So they would have to set out the reasons as to why they want to waiver the rules as they're set out, but do that in a clear and transparent manner as well. So similarly, around clarity, we'd be looking under recommendation 12 to strengthen the clarity when a single contract negotiation or multi-contract negotiation is carried out, and then we would then set out the principles in terms of how those are to be considered and applied. At this moment in time, under the existing procurement governance arrangements, we do not have in place clarity around what would constitute a breach of procedure, and the recommendation is then to actually close that gap under the current arrangement. So we would look to incorporate a clear breach procedure, and again we then set out the principles of how that breach procedure is then applied and what steps would need to be followed. Recommendation 14 again helps to, or should help to, improve clarity around the actions to be taken forward in the case of emergencies. So that's part of the existing arrangements are in there, but we want to improve the clarity of what constitutes an emergency and what steps would need to be put in place there. Recommendation 15 is the alignment of authorisations for sign-off in line with the schema delegations. There's some ambiguity, shall we say, as to the existing arrangements, and what we would be looking to do there is align the schema delegations to authorisations for sign-off in regards to commercial arrangements. Recommendation 16 is the contract extension rules would be updated, which again would provide greater clarity as to what steps need to be followed and strengthen the clarity as to the process and what arrangements need to be put in place from what we've currently got. The recommendation 17, contract management rules to be updated during the approach, so that we're looking to then incorporate an updated contract management framework as part of the works that we're doing there. So again, that would provide some greater clarity and guidance for how contracts are managed and at what stages any things like extensions are taken up and things like that. Recommendation 18, contract variation procedures to be updated during that stages as well. So that's as I say, that when and how we vary contracts at the moment is a little bit loose, and what we would be wanting to do then is make sure that there's greater clarity in the new procurement governance arrangements going forward. One of the key points of feedback from supplier survey feeds into recommendation 19, which is the advertising of future opportunities and upcoming tender opportunities online. So what we'd be looking to do there is utilise the work around the planned procurement activities and make sure that we're advertising early on the intranet, so that again suppliers have a better opportunity to engage with us on that. Recommendation 20 is more of an operational matter, but it's improving how we report on expiring contracts and how we can then make sure that we are, if you like, ahead of the curve in regards to timelines to re-procure new tenders as well. Recommendation 21 is a clear clause within the contract documents and quotation documents to highlight route to zero opportunities where appropriate to and proportional to those arrangements. And then recommendation 22 is the simply that we've got some open audit recommendations which will need to update as part of the addressing of the documentation that goes alongside the procurement governance arrangements. So if you like, those are the recommendations. I pause at that point. I do apologise, it covers a lot of ground, but any queries at that moment in time, Chair?
Steve, obviously we've spent a lot of time on this since November, and there has been a lot of discussions, so I don't want to open it up for discussion if there's any points of clarification, but if you look from page 67 onwards, it actually tells you who's agreed and who's not and how it's come through. I think all the points have been detailed. Obviously, you know, Councillor Jenkins didn't agree with some of the recommendations, which is actually noted. So I'll open it up for any clarification. Tristan?
Yeah, so it's not on a point of clarification. I just first of all want to echo your thanks to everyone who participated in this exercise. It's been really valuable. I appreciate that procurement governance isn't necessarily the most exciting, or perhaps the reason people went into local government in the first place, but it is very important, and this has been a genuinely valuable exercise. So I thank everyone. Can I just also just point to place? I particularly welcome the issues that I've come across in the time in the portfolio that I think will be greatly helped by recommendations 12 and 13, which are around SCNs and then breach procedures around those. 20 to do reporting benefit of expiring contracts, I think really valuable and something that has been a consistent bugbear. Steve knows that behind the scenes we've had numerous discussions about this and attempts to iron out the process, so really welcome that. And then on 21 in terms of clear clause in tender documents in relation to route to zero, which I think again is very important and we welcome by members. So that's just wanted to throw my 2 pence worth. But again, I said, really welcome the recommendation. It's really helpful.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank you, Chair, as well. It's been a strenuous exercise over the last few months. Some meetings were hybrid, some were online, and some were face to face. And thanks, Steve and the officers. I think it's a good piece of work that we've come up with 22 recommendations. That's usually unheard of from task and finish groups. I think it's a quite substantive piece of work, and the cabinet member has already acknowledged that there's some good pieces of recommendations that have come out from this. I particularly like the one that you're going to ask for 2 local suppliers for quote. That's really, really good. And also the one about expired larger contracts. They're going to come to scrutiny a lot sooner than they would ordinarily. And I think that should be a feature. Like you have planned procurement activities as a feature, part of the agenda. Perhaps we can add something in that particular section for expired contracts, because we, as largest council in Western Europe, we do have some major contracts which do need added scrutiny from members, not just from the members from the executive. So I welcome this piece of work and contrary to what Tristan said, I found it quite entertaining. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
We'll go on to agenda item eight.
Could I ask a moment?
Yeah.
Recommendation 20. I've read it. I don't know whether it's possible to tweak it because whilst we've tried to get a belt and braces situation as far as expired contracts are concerned, is it possible for us to put into any contract that expiring contracts will be in breach should they carry on trading with us? And therefore it would have to be on a month-to-month basis until a new contract was signed.
Steve?
Yeah, I mean, expired contracts, councillor, are one of those sort of, odd points really, because a contract is formed by offer and acceptance, and sometimes if a supplier, even though the sort of the paper version of the contract may have expired, by continuing to receive the goods, we are, if you like, by default in a contract. So it's very difficult to sort of write that in. I mean, clearly what we want to do, and part of the work that we put in place there by identifying those expiring contracts earlier, by identifying and exposing breaches and those sorts of things, we would be looking to try and minimise, and reporting on all of that, we'd be looking to try and minimise those circumstances going forward. So I think that's probably as a good a place as we could get to, I would suggest.
I've raised the issue.
Can I suggest, Chair, that I think with the implementation of this recommendation, I think it's worth then monitoring how that process works. I'm fairly confident that will make quite a big difference in terms of the notification of expiring contracts, and therefore action will inevitably follow that early notification should do. Beyond any more governance steps around it, I think, as I said, I think there's a period of bedding in, see how this works over the period. And then if further work is required, then perhaps come back and see how it's working in a year's time. That would be my
concern is born out of the fact that when I was responsible for it, I was always being brought extensions to contracts, which, if I'm quite honest, always used to be like light in the blue touch paper as far as I was concerned, because it happened far too often. I tried to put a stop to it by monitoring the situation, but I'm just trying to protect the City Council's position on the system.
Can we not put a clause in there, recommendation 20 to be reviewed in 12 months? Yeah, see how it goes.
Sorry, Steve, I was just going to say, recommendation 3.2 on the cover report, these recommendations will come back in 6 months, so it won't even be 12 months. So I think part of the process of any monitoring recommendations will come through, and I think we can make sure that these points are picked up as part of that update report.
Yeah, because it's going to take time to bed in.
Yeah.
So 12 months.
I think 12, yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Chair, part of Scrutiny as well is to monitor the recommendations and implementation anyway, so that's something that we could pick up as Councillor Tilsley has already flagged itself.
Okay.
I was going to say another thing, but can I just check that? So these recommendations, do these not now have to go to full council?
Well, they've got to formally agree there first.
Yeah, but how would these become policy?
I think, if I may, I think the suggestion was that they would come to myself as cabinet member and then implement it through the normal where it is constitutional, will be implemented through the normal constitutional review, which will be done post-election in May, any constitutional tweaks. But other than that, they are policy, so it is within the cabinet member's discretion to implement them as they see fit. So I think the exact recommendations shall be presented to the shall be presented to the Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources to be requested to pursue their implementation. So I've noted the recommendations that I think they're all welcome recommendations, and therefore will pursue their implementation as directed by the report.
Okay, so you have the authority to do that, other than where it requires a constitutional change, it should be at a subsequent full council, which may look different to the one we have at the moment. Well, I mean, it will look different. How different remains to be seen. Okay, for the vote.
We all serve the will of the electors.
Well, I certainly do. I'm not sure that could be said of every politician. I do agree, however, that a huge amount of work went into this. It's a surprisingly complex subject, and each recommendation has implications and things associated with it that require a lot of thinking through. So well done to everyone for the effort. The points that were made by me in my letter were discussed and agreed with my group, and that's how we feel. So we weren't able to agree all the recommendations. And principally, I think it comes down to this point about political accountability versus officer accountability, and we feel there isn't sufficient political accountability. And that's why we can't support this report to the extent set out in my letter.
Okay, thank you. Okay, can we formally agree on the report?
Agreed.
Yes, but you need to note that I disagree.
We will know Councillor Jenkins.
Yeah, we will.
The other thing was, obviously, there was reference earlier on recommendations 3 and 4.
Yeah.
So I think if the recommendations in the Cabinet report are agreed, subject to those changes, is that what's been agreed? Apart from agreed by Councillor Jenkins.
Just that issue on the local issue. Just that issue on the issue.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
The local suppliers.
Okay.
Okay, if you tell me I read it, I'll believe you.
We agree. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Item 8, building on business charter for social responsibility. Steve, again. Are you there?
It's unmoved.
You're on mute, Steve.
Apologies, Chair. Yeah, just bear with me. I'm just trying to go back into the report and was in the report, which was then struggling to unmute. Just bear with me until I get to the right page in regards to that. Just bear with me. Apologies, Chair. Jim, is there anything that you wanted to just update in regards to this report around the information that's presented? I noted it is your report in that sense.
Yeah, sorry, Steve, and sorry I didn't come in quicker there. Yeah, I'm more than happy to. Would you like me to go through the report, Chairman?
Yes, please.
Okay. I was asked to pick this up by Steve on behalf of Sharad, who's been away. He was stuck in Malaya for a couple of weeks with COVID. But anyway, that's just background news. So we were asked to look at the Birmingham Business Charter for Social Responsibility website. And in particular, Councillor Mahmood asked the Chair of Resources and Overview Scrutiny Committee to instruct the relevant officers to bring a detailed report to the next committee so it can be discussed. In the appendix at the bottom, in Appendix A of the paper, we took an extract from the report, and I'll just basically go through it. Councillor Mahmood said, I noted that the BBC website is and that the signatures for the charter stands at 518. However, 409 of them have their status listed as expired, with only 109 listed as live. It then says perhaps the signatory is no longer contract with us, or that the website has not been updated. As such, would the Chair of Resources and Overview Scrutiny Committee instruct the relevant officers to bring a detailed report to the committee as we move forward? So we've done an investigation into this, Chair, and and we from point 2 on there, we basically said the number of live Birmingham Business Charters for social responsibility signatures in any given year is entirely dependent upon the number of procurements and the values that are being processed. And for that reason, it would be inappropriate to set a KPI for the number of signatures that we set. We go on to say it's only fair that only fairly recently that the website has been modified to indicate those signatures that were live or not. Indeed, Councillor Mahmood was the cabinet member where this distinction was made. And then we've made the point that as of the 17th of March, the website shows 523 named organisations, of which 114 are accredited and listed as live, and there are 409 that are listed as expired. Those organisations marked as live have a current action plan against which they are delivering, and where they are contracted, they deliver it. The delivery is being monitored by contract managers. For those organisations marked as expired, no longer have an active action plan against what is being delivered. The distinction has prompted some expired organisations to review their action plan. So I think basically in summary, what we're saying is that we're showing on the website the full 523, but the actual 114 that are active are being monitored, and we are working with some of the 409 to encourage them to update their action plans also.
Okay. Thanks, Jim. Members? Yeah, Councillor Jenkins.
When we read this, it struck some of us that the report seemed to have an implied criticism of Councillor Mahmood, in that it says when he was cabinet member it was even worse. And I don't know whether we're happy with that. I mean, I don't know whether we should have officer reports criticising previous cabinet members. I mean, were you happy with that? I mean, you know,
within PERDIP, shouldn't really say much, but I don't think there was a need for a reference to me being a former cabinet member, because I asked in the role of scrutiny.
Sorry, Chair, and sorry, Councillor Mahmood and Councillor Jenkins. I didn't see any inference in that sense, and apologies if it has come across that way.
Well, you don't have to apologise to me. I was representing Councillor Mahmood on this occasion. I'm sure he's able to speak for himself, actually. But it just struck us that it sort of it just seemed to cross the line. That's all.
Yeah, I apologise, councillors, if that's the way it's come across.
Shrinking violet.
Thank you, Councillor Jenkins. I was actually going to chair. I was actually going to pick up on that point and say I don't think there's a need for a reference to the fact that I was a cabinet member and I held the role of management and efficiency, and then contract commissioning and something else, contract management. That's it. So I didn't really think there was a need for a reference to that, but it's happened. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it, and I've not lost any sleep over it. But thank you to Councillor Jenkins for flagging that up. But what I was going to say is that we never. As elected members, we represent the public, and in scrutiny, we represent the citizens of the city. So we have to ask questions that they're not in a position to ask. And if you've got someone, member of the public, just logging on to that part of the website of the city council, all they will see is live and expired. And I think for them, it's quite confusing in the sense that they haven't got access to all the information that we have, that we're privy to as elected members. So perhaps a better word would be no longer contracting with the council, because it just says expired. So they may think, well, they may still be contracting with the council. So all of these 523 organisations that have been listed, member of the public doesn't know whether they still contract. All it says is expired or live, and just refers to a business charter. So maybe some wording that
it is a large number, 400 odd.
And we are a large council, so you do expect that. The second thing, what I think may be beneficial is, again, there may be some contractual obligations around this, but it would be useful if members of the public could actually see that action plans that have been delivered, even for an expired contract with an organisation. It would be really, really useful if we could see something, but I know sometimes around the contractual element and the negotiations that take place, that may not be possible. And secondly, just, when we introduced the business charter many years back, and it's one of the best things that the City Council has done in part of the Labour administration, some of the large organisations in the city, we did say we would try to work with them for them to be to be signatories to the business charter, whether or not they're contracting with us, but just to show the social responsibility that they're delivering. So it would be good to have some joint working with large organisations, some like Birmingham Airport, where we still hold a stake of about 18% with Birmingham Airport. They carry a lot of social responsibility. It would be useful. So all I was doing is, I mean, if I'm honoured that this report has actually come back to Scrutiny Committee. If I had known that at the start of the municipal year, perhaps I would have asked the question at every single council meeting to the chair. But thank you for that. And in the reference, Councillor Jenkins has brought that. But I do think it does need to be expanded more so a member of the public can fully understand what we're trying to achieve as a council, which I very much welcome, and I'm very, very huge supporter of the business charter of social responsibility. I always have been, and I think it's something that we should keep on expanding. Thank you, Chair.
As Councillor Mahmood has mentioned, Birmingham Airport may I declare a non-pecuniary interest along with Councillor Tristan.
May I also declare to say that the interest. Can I just make a quick one? I had to admit I missed this particular reference to yourself, Councillor Mahmood, and I think you're right in that. Hopefully it's not taken as explicit criticism. Obviously, as cabinet members, things change. There may well be things, I'm sure, that have happened under my period that a future scrutiny committee will seek to tidy up or amend. And I hope that won't be viewed as explicit criticism of the work that I've tried to do in this portfolio. And likewise, and there was no greater champion for the charter than Councillor Mood when he did have this role. I think in terms of publishing action plans, I would absolutely love us to do that, but unfortunately, I think it would be incredibly difficult. Under procurement law, I think it would be almost impossible to do that. My only other comment about the language. I suppose the difficulty is, some contractors, and I don't know, maybe Jim could advise on this, presumably some of those that do expire will then become live again because they will then secure a new contract and then come back into the system. So I think actually the suggestion around the wording of in contract or not in contract, some people live and not in contract, something like that, I think perhaps is a helpful clarification. There's no reason why we couldn't do that.
Yes, we can. We'll take that away and address that, Councillor.
Okay, I mean, thanks to you and Steve, and thanks to Councillor Mahmood. That's where scrutiny comes in, and we highlight a lot of the times, a lot of the things are forgotten or not talked about. So I'd like to thank Councillor Mahmood actually bringing the business charter to the scrutiny, so we can and officers can actually focus on it. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Plan procurement activity reports.
Yeah. I mean, this is as standard. We bring the plan procurement report. It has already been through cabinet. There was a couple of inquiries that was only a couple of days ago, so we're still going to get back on those to the relevant members who raised them. But really, it's presented for information, or if there's any questions for clarity, we can provide them here, or we can go away to service areas and try and get them.
Okay. Thanks for that. Work programme.
Yeah, I was just going to say, this is obviously the last meeting of this week of this committee, but I think collectively, the scrutiny chairs and coordinating committee are looking at what that might be rolled forward. It's not a case of saying that the future committee has to do a particular piece of work, but it's an opportunity at other meetings to either highlight pieces of work that haven't been done by this committee this year, but you think should be picked up next year, and if there's anything else that's come out over the last couple of months that you think should be in the pot, please let me know this afternoon, and I can make sure that those suggestions are picked up as part of what we're going to look for next year.
Okay. Thanks for that. Apart from the fact that there is another meeting scheduled on the agenda.
That was on the 20. Yeah, that was on the 28th. The reason for that, Jay's not here, and Christian. That's why we had a packed agenda this time.
No, it's all right, because it was a music hall, the reason if it had been cancelled, that's quite all right. But I did want to note that it is Tristan's last meeting here, and thank him for the work that he's done and the contribution that he's made to the workings of the City Council. Thank you.
So can I just add to that, just really cover, I just add to that, thank you to the committee. It has genuinely been a pleasure to come to this committee and work with members. I think we've made a positive contribution, working together to the direction of the city. I think we've hopefully noticed significant improvements over the last few years, and that is in great part due to the contribution of this committee and all the scrutiny committees. And particularly thank you, Chair, for your efforts in holding together. It hasn't always been easy, but you've done a grand job. So.
Yeah, just before I bring Councillor Moody, it is my last meeting.
I was going to thank you.
It is my last meeting as well. I'd just like to thank all the committee members, Christian, and especially Jane. Wish her well. She's not well. She's done some tremendous work. She's been a fabulous support to myself and to the committee. And again, Tristan, thank you very much. You've been there, bringing the reports and giving us a really, really good update. Your attendance has been absolutely fantastic throughout the year. And also all the officers, thank you very much. You are here. Thanks for all your help and support during the year, and obviously all the members. Thank you all very much. Councillor Nude.
Oh, I'm going to be boring again before I start all the good boys. I was just going to ask what the long-term debt strategy will be. It's something that I've been speaking about since start of the municipal year. That could be penciled in at some point going forward, and likewise, Councillor Tristan Chatfield. He's one of the few cabinet members that has attended every single scrutiny committee. So really thankful for his presentation and all the officers that have been supporting Tristan as well. It's been very, very thought-provoking as well in the sense of the work that we've been doing. And he's been trying to basically step into all the different areas of the executive, assist us with the questions that we have. I'm very welcome. I've had some enjoyable time with in cabinet when I was working with Tristan. He's one of the brightest and one of the hard-working members that we've come across. So thank you for everything you've done, and wish you all the very best for the future. And likewise, Chair, it's been a pleasure working with you for the last 11 years. We're neighbouring ward colleagues as well, and you brought a tremendous amount of experience to the City Council in your previous roles in education to the forefront, and you've been a brilliant chair here in resources. And thank you for everything you've done, and wish you all the very best for the future too.
Thank you. Paul, do you want to? Well, I noted that it was your last meeting. Thank you for your chairmanship of the committee, and wish you all the very best. Thank you. Okay, request for calling councillors for action or any petitions?
I've always wanted to say yes, Bob.
Any other urgent business? Authority to act? Great. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Must be the only meeting you've never submitted a